New developments in a deadly domestic dispute in Birmingham. Police have just identified the man they say was hit and pinned against a house by the mother of his children.
This all unfolding during a birthday and Easter celebration last night. ABC 3340's Gracie Johnson joins us live with the latest.
Brenda, investigators say 27-year-old Mickese James Bostic died after being hit, but an autopsy will determine his exact cause of death. Now, I'm told an argument between Bostic and his children's mother escalated to the point where a gun was involved and eventually led to his death.
Sunday evening, April 20th, 2025. A day meant for celebration, family gatherings, and renewal. In East Birmingham, Alabama, the Bostic-Jackson household on Lisa Lane was alive with the dual joy of holiday festivities and a birthday celebration. Children laughed, food was shared, and for a moment, everything seemed perfect. But as darkness fell across the neighborhood, the atmosphere inside that home shifted dramatically. What began as a heated argument between Mickese James Bostic and Shottice Jackson, parents to 3 young children, would escalate with shocking speed into violence that no one could have anticipated. Within hours, emergency vehicles would flood the quiet street, their flashing lights illuminating a scene that officers would later describe as chaotic and heartbreaking. Mickese Bostic wasn't just any victim. For 8 years, he had dedicated his professional life to helping troubled youth as a juvenile detention officer in Jefferson County. His colleagues knew him as someone who believed in second chances, who worked tirelessly to guide young people toward better paths. Now, in a cruel twist of fate, his own life would end violently, with his children bearing witness to the unthinkable. The argument that night quickly moved beyond words. Witnesses would later recount the sound of gunshots inside the home, Jackson allegedly firing a weapon in rage. But it wasn't bullets that claimed Bostic's life. As the confrontation spilled outside into the cool evening air, Jackson made a decision that transformed an already dangerous situation into a deadly one. In one devastating moment, she allegedly got behind the wheel of a vehicle and accelerated toward Bostic. The impact trapped him between the car and the exterior wall of their home, a method of murder so unexpected and brutal that first responders, despite their training, were visibly shaken upon arrival. By 10:21 p.m., medical personnel pronounced Mickese Bostic dead at the scene. His body remained wedged between metal and brick, a visual metaphor for how domestic conflicts can trap victims with lethal consequences. This isn't just another crime story. It's a stark reminder of how quickly domestic situations can turn deadly, how violence recognizes no gender boundaries, and how children become the silent victims who carry the heaviest burden of all, the memory of witnessing a parent's death. Have you ever seen relationship conflicts escalate beyond what anyone thought possible? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your experiences might help others recognize warning patterns before they lead to tragedy. Welcome to Dark Trace Crime Stories, where we explore the most gripping and tragic true crime stories. If you're new here, be kind to like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update on the most chilling true crime cases. Before his name appeared in tragic headlines, Mickese James Bostic built a life defined by service, dedication, and family. For those who knew him personally, the violent end to his story stands in stark contrast to how he lived. For over 8 years, Bostic served as a juvenile detention officer in Jefferson County, Alabama. His role went far beyond simple supervision. Colleagues noted his genuine commitment to the troubled youth under his care. In a system where many young people feel abandoned, Bostic represented something different, an authority figure who saw potential where others saw only problems. He took pride in his role within the justice system, recalled a coworker who worked alongside him for several years. Mickese believed in accountability, but he also believed in second chances. He understood many of these kids came from difficult circumstances, and he wanted to be part of their path forward. His approach to his professional responsibilities mirrored his philosophy as a father. Those close to the family described Bostic as deeply involved in the lives of all 5 children in the household. his 3 biological children with Jackson, as well as her 2 children from previous relationships. He embraced the role of father figure to all 5, making no distinction in his care and attention. The Bostic home on Lisa Lane represented the center of his world. There, he and Shatice Jackson created a blended family unit that, despite its challenges, remained intact until that fateful April evening. Neighbors often saw Bostic playing with the children in the yard or working on home improvement projects, small moments that painted the picture of a man invested in creating stability for a family he had helped build. His daily routine reflected the balancing act familiar to many working parents in large, blended families. Early mornings, preparing children for school. Long shifts at the juvenile detention center where he monitored, mentored, and sometimes mediated conflicts among young detainees. Evenings spent helping with homework, preparing meals, and handling the countless responsibilities that come with maintaining a household of 7. Colleagues noted his reliability, rarely missing shifts, willing to cover for others when needed, and bringing a consistent presence to a workplace that often dealt with unpredictable situations. This steadiness extended to his community involvement, where he participated in neighborhood watch programs and occasionally volunteered at community events. The relationship between Bostic and Jackson had produced 3 biological children together, while Bostic had stepped into the role of father for her 2 older children. Friends described him as a man who fully embraced this blended family, treating all 5 children with equal care and commitment. He never made any distinction, said one family friend who asked to remain anonymous. Those kids were his kids, period. Mickese was the kind of man who understood that being a father is about much more than biology. What makes Bostic's story particularly poignant is how ordinary it was until its extraordinary end. He wasn't a public figure or celebrity. He was a working father in a large blended family, a dedicated professional, a man trying to make a positive difference both at home and in his community. His daily concerns revolved around all 5 children's education, their future prospects, and providing them with opportunities he believed they deserved. The tragedy of April 20th didn't just end a life. It interrupted a legacy of service that was still being written. It robbed 5 children of their father figure, a detention center of a valued officer, and a community of a man who understood that sometimes the most important work happens quietly, one interaction at a time, away from public recognition or acclaim. April 20th, 2025, began as a day of dual celebration in the Bostic-Jackson household. Easter Sunday, a day of religious significance for many families, coincided with a birthday celebration, creating the perfect occasion for extended family to gather at their home on Lisa Lane in East Birmingham. The morning started with traditional Easter activities. Children hunting for hidden eggs in the yard, baskets filled with candy and small gifts, and preparations for a large family meal. By midday, relatives had begun to arrive. The house filled with the sounds of conversation, laughter, and music. Tables were arranged with holiday foods, ham, potato salad, deviled eggs, and birthday cake. Children played in the yard while adults congregated in the living room and kitchen, sharing stories and catching up on family news. Mickese Bostic, by all accounts, was in good spirits, helping to grill food outside and ensuring guests had everything they needed. It was a beautiful day, one family member would later tell investigators. Everyone was having a good time. The kids were happy. There was nothing to suggest what would happen later. As afternoon transitioned to evening, most guests began to depart. Extended family members said their goodbyes, taking leftover food and making plans for future gatherings. By nightfall, only the immediate family remained in the house, Bostic, Jackson, and the 5 children. The festive atmosphere had given way to the quiet routine of a Sunday evening, cleaning up after guests, preparing for the school week ahead, and settling children into their nighttime routines. It was around 9 p.m. when the first signs of tension emerged. According to witness statements later collected by police, Bostic and Jackson began arguing in the kitchen while cleaning up. What started as a disagreement, the specific cause of which remains unclear, quickly escalated in both volume and intensity. The children, sensing the shift in mood, retreated to bedrooms, though they could still hear the raised voices of their parents. The argument moved from the kitchen to the living room, growing more heated with each passing minute. Words turned to shouts, and the confrontation took a dangerous turn when Jackson allegedly retrieved a firearm from elsewhere in the house. In a moment that would forever change the trajectory of this family, she fired shots inside the home. Remarkably, no one was struck by bullets, but the introduction of gunfire transformed an already volatile situation into a potentially deadly one. The gunshots created panic within the house. The older children later reported hearing the shots and hiding in closets, while the younger ones began crying. The confrontation then spilled outside, with both Bostic and Jackson exiting the front door and continuing their argument in the yard. Neighbors, alarmed by the sound of gunfire, had already begun calling 911. One neighbor reported seeing Bostic attempting to walk away from the house, while Jackson followed, still shouting. What happened next occurred with devastating speed. Jackson allegedly got into a vehicle parked in the driveway. Rather than using this moment to separate and de-escalate, she made a decision that would prove fatal. According to multiple witness accounts, she started the engine, put the car in drive, and accelerated directly toward Bostic. The impact was catastrophic. Bostic became pinned between the vehicle and the exterior brick wall of the house. The force crushed him against the structure, causing immediate and severe injuries. Neighbors who witnessed the collision described a horrifying scene: Bostic trapped and unresponsive, Jackson exiting the vehicle in apparent shock, and children emerging from the house screaming. Emergency services received the first 911 call at 9:47 p.m. Police units from multiple precincts responded, arriving at the scene by 9:58 p.m. Paramedics followed minutes later, immediately attending to Bostic, who remained wedged between the vehicle and house. Despite their rapid response and efforts to stabilize him, the injuries were too severe. Medical personnel pronounced Mickese Bostic dead at 10:21 p.m., less than an hour after the argument had first begun. Police described the scene as chaotic and emotionally charged. Officers had to manage multiple priorities simultaneously: securing Jackson, who remained at the scene, comforting the traumatized children who had witnessed parts of the incident, interviewing neighbors who had seen or heard portions of the confrontation, and preserving evidence at what had now become a homicide scene. The 5 children, who hours earlier had been celebrating Easter and a birthday, were now witnesses to their father's violent death. Officers on scene made the difficult decision to remove them from the property, placing them temporarily with a relative who lived nearby while social services were contacted. In the span of less than an hour, a day meant for celebration had transformed into a tragedy that would permanently alter the lives of everyone involved. A family had been shattered, 5 children traumatized, and a man who had dedicated his life to helping troubled youth had lost his own life in an act of domestic violence that no one saw coming.
Also breaking right now, in a Birmingham homicide case, Shatise Jackson, a 30-year-old mother, is facing a capital murder charge after police say she ran over 27-year-old Mickese Bostic, the father of her children, during a gathering on Easter Sunday.
And today she made her first court appearance. ABC 3340's Gracie Johnson was in the courtroom. And Gracie, what happened?
The scene that greeted first responders on Lisa Lane that Easter Sunday night was one that even experienced officers found disturbing. Multiple police units converged on the property, their flashing lights illuminating a neighborhood in shock. The vehicle remained pressed against the house, with Bostic's body still trapped between metal and brick, a grim tableau that officers would need to document before medical examiners could remove his remains. Birmingham Police Department officers quickly established a perimeter, cordoning off the area with yellow crime scene tape that fluttered in the night breeze. Neighbors stood in small clusters on nearby lawns, some still in their Easter clothes, watching as investigators moved methodically through the property. Inside the home, evidence of the day's earlier celebrations, Easter decorations, birthday wrapping paper, and half-eaten cake, stood in stark contrast to the bullet holes now marking the walls. Shatise Jackson was taken into custody at the scene. Witnesses described her as appearing dazed, sitting on the curb with officers nearby, occasionally looking toward the house but saying little. She would later be transported to the Birmingham Police Department for formal questioning and processing. Perhaps most heartbreaking was the situation of the 5 children, ranging in age from elementary to early teens. They had not only lost their father figure, but had witnessed various portions of the violence that took his life. Officers trained in dealing with traumatized children attempted to shield them from the worst of the scene, gathering them in a neighbor's home until family members could arrive. "Those kids saw things no child should ever see," said one officer who requested anonymity due to the ongoing investigation. "They were confused, terrified, and asking questions we couldn't answer. How do you explain to a child that their mother killed their father?" Social services were immediately contacted, and victim advocates arrived to begin the process of arranging counseling and support. The immediate concern was finding appropriate placement for the children, a challenge given the circumstances that had left one parent dead and another in police custody. As news of the incident spread through Birmingham, the community's reaction was one of stunned disbelief. Bostic's colleagues at the Jefferson County Juvenile Detention Center were particularly affected. Many had worked alongside him for years, witnessing his dedication to helping troubled youth. The irony that a man who had devoted his career to preventing violence had died so violently himself was not lost on his coworkers. By Monday morning, Helen Hayes, Director of Public Information for the Jefferson County Commission, released an official statement. This is obviously an extremely difficult time for his family, friends, and colleagues. We are praying for all involved. The brief statement reflected the shock felt throughout the county government, where Bostic had been a respected employee for over 8 years. Local churches and community organizations quickly mobilized to offer support to the children and extended family. A candlelight vigil was organized for the following evening, bringing together colleagues, neighbors, and community members still trying to process the sudden and violent loss. The case quickly gained attention in local media, with headlines emphasizing the Easter timing and the domestic nature of the violence. News vans parked along the perimeter of Lisa Lane, reporters delivering somber updates with the crime scene visible in the background. For a community already dealing with various forms of violence, this case stood out for its timing, its brutality, and the fact that 5 children had witnessed their family torn apart in a single evening. What country or state are you watching from? Has a case like this happened in your area? The sad reality is that domestic violence knows no geographic boundaries. It happens in communities large and small, urban and rural, wealthy and disadvantaged. Your experiences or observations might help others recognize warning signs before tragedy strikes. The ripple effects of Mickese Bostic's death extended far beyond the crime scene on Lisa Lane, touching multiple communities connected to his life and work. In the days following the Easter Sunday tragedy, these impacts became increasingly apparent as colleagues, neighbors, and institutions grappled with the sudden loss. At the Jefferson County Juvenile Detention Center, where Bostic had worked for 8 years, the atmosphere was described as somber and subdued. Staff members who had worked alongside him daily now faced empty shifts and the absence of a trusted colleague. Many struggled to process how someone who had dedicated his professional life to helping troubled youth and de-escalating conflict had died in such a violent manner. "We deal with crisis situations every day here," said one colleague who requested anonymity. "We're trained to recognize warning signs, to intervene before things escalate. That's what makes this so hard to accept." Mickese was skilled at defusing tension. He helped kids find better ways to handle anger. And now he's gone because of the very kind of violence he worked to prevent. The detention center administration arranged for grief counselors to be available to staff members. A memorial table appeared in the break room, featuring photos of Bostic and a notebook where colleagues could write memories or messages to his family. Some staff members wore black ribbons on their uniforms, a quiet acknowledgement of their loss. The professional impact extended beyond emotional responses. Bostic's absence created practical challenges for the facility, which was already understaffed. Colleagues volunteered to cover his shifts, many feeling it was a way to honor his memory, while ensuring the detained youth continued to receive proper supervision and support. The young people housed at the detention center, many of whom had built relationships with Bostic during their stays, also felt the impact. Administrators made the difficult decision to inform them of his death, recognizing that rumors would inevitably spread and potentially cause more harm than a controlled disclosure. For some of these troubled youth, Bostic had been a rare, stable adult presence in their lives, and his loss represented yet another disruption in already chaotic circumstances. In the East Birmingham neighborhood where the Bostic-Jackson family had lived, residents struggled to reconcile the violent event with the family they thought they knew. Neighbors who had waved hello to Bostic as he played with his children or worked in his yard now found themselves being interviewed by detectives and journalists, trying to recall any signs of trouble they might have missed. They seemed like any other family, one neighbor told a local news station. You never know what's happening behind closed doors, I guess. Those poor children, that's who I keep thinking about. Media coverage intensified as details emerged. Local television stations led their broadcasts with updates on the case. The Birmingham News ran front-page stories, exploring not just the crime itself, but the broader issue of domestic violence against men, a topic often overlooked in public discourse. Some coverage focused on the Easter timing, emphasizing the contrast between the holiday's themes of renewal and the finality of Bostic's death. But perhaps the most profound impact was on the 5 children who had lost their father figure and, effectively, their mother as well. In the immediate aftermath, they were placed with relatives, a temporary solution, while authorities determined the best long-term arrangement. The children's trauma was multifaceted. They had not only lost both parents in different ways, but had witnessed violence that would require extensive professional intervention to process. Child psychologists brought in to assess the children reported symptoms of acute stress disorder, nightmares, flashbacks, emotional numbness, and anxiety. The older children showed signs of survivor's guilt, questioning whether they could have somehow prevented the tragedy. The younger ones struggled to comprehend why they couldn't return home or see their parents. Social services worked to keep the siblings together, recognizing that separating them would add another layer of trauma to an already devastating situation. Extended family members stepped forward, offering homes and support, but the legal and emotional complexities of the situation made quick solutions impossible. Schools where the children were enrolled implemented support protocols, with counselors made available and teachers briefed on how to recognize signs of trauma in the classroom. Classmates and their parents organized meal trains and gift card collections for the family members now caring for the children. As one social worker involved in the case noted, when domestic violence claims a life, the victim count extends far beyond the deceased. These children will carry this experience for the rest of their lives. Our job now is to ensure they don't carry it alone. The death of Mickese Bostic forces us to confront an often overlooked reality in discussions of domestic violence. Men can be victims too. While public awareness campaigns and support services have rightfully focused on female victims, who statistically comprise the majority of cases, the experiences of male victims frequently remain in the shadows, obscured by societal expectations and persistent myths. According to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, 1 in 9 men experience severe intimate partner physical violence. Approximately 1 in 7 men have been victims of severe physical violence by an intimate partner during their lifetime. These numbers, while lower than those for women, still represent millions of men suffering in situations they feel unable to escape or even acknowledge. Male victims face unique barriers when seeking help. Cultural expectations around masculinity often make it difficult for men to identify themselves as victims or to reach out for assistance. Many men report feeling shame or embarrassment when experiencing abuse, concerned they will be ridiculed or disbelieved if they come forward. This reluctance is compounded by a support system primarily designed with female victims in mind. There's a persistent belief that men should be able to defend themselves, explains Dr. Emily Rothman, a domestic violence researcher. This ignores the reality that many male victims stay in abusive relationships for the same reasons women do: concern for children, financial entanglement, emotional manipulation, and fear of escalation if they attempt to leave. In Bostic's case, His role as a father figure to 5 children likely complicated any decisions about the relationship. Like many victims, he may have stayed in a volatile situation out of dedication to the children, believing that maintaining the family unit was worth enduring personal difficulties. The warning signs that precede domestic homicide are often similar regardless of the victim's gender. Research on domestic violence escalation identifies several risk factors that increase the danger of a situation turning deadly. Access to weapons, previous threats or acts of violence, controlling behaviors, and substance abuse issues. While we cannot know which of these factors may have been present in the Bostic-Jackson household, the presence of a firearm, which Jackson allegedly used during their final argument, significantly increased the lethality risk. Domestic violence rarely begins with extreme acts. Instead, it typically follows a pattern of escalation. Verbal abuse leads to minor physical confrontations, which gradually increase in severity. Many victims describe a walking on eggshells existence, where they modify their behavior to avoid triggering their partner's anger. This pattern creates a dangerous normalization of increasingly abusive behavior. The path from domestic violence to homicide often includes specific escalation points. Research by Dr. Jacqueline Campbell, a leading expert on domestic violence fatalities, identifies separation as a particularly dangerous time. When a victim attempts to leave or establish boundaries, the risk of lethal violence increases dramatically. Other risk factors include unemployment, stepchildren in the home, threats of suicide by the abuser, and extreme jealousy or possessiveness. For male victims specifically, there may be fewer recognized exit paths. Shelters for men are rare, legal protections may be applied unevenly, and friends or family might minimize the danger. Male victims often report being told to man up or handle their domestic issues privately when they do attempt to seek help. The tragedy of Mickese Bostic's death highlights the need for a more inclusive approach to domestic violence awareness and intervention. By acknowledging that domestic violence affects people of all genders, we create space for all victims to seek help before situations escalate to violence or homicide. As one domestic violence advocate noted after learning of Bostic's death, every victim deserves to be believed and supported, regardless of gender. Every death is one too many, and each should motivate us to improve our response to all forms of intimate partner violence. In the aftermath of tragedy, communities often search for meaning, some way to make sense of senseless violence. For those who knew Mickese Bostic, his legacy continues through the lives he touched during his 8 years as a juvenile detention officer and his dedication as a father to 5 children. Former colleagues at the Jefferson County Juvenile Detention Center established a memorial fund in Bostic's name, dedicated to providing resources for youth transitioning out of the system. This initiative reflects the work Bostic had quietly pursued throughout his career, helping troubled young people find paths toward stability and purpose. Several former detainees came forward after his death to share stories of how Bostic's guidance had influenced their decisions to pursue education or employment rather than returning to destructive patterns. He believed in second chances, said one young man who had been under Bostic's supervision 3 years earlier. He told me my past mistakes didn't have to define my future. I'm in community college now because he convinced me I could be more than my worst decisions. This perspective, that people can change, that support matters, that intervention works, represents perhaps the most powerful aspect of Bostic's professional legacy. In a system often focused on punishment, he emphasized rehabilitation and human potential. The tragic irony that he himself became a victim of violence adds poignancy to this legacy, but doesn't diminish its value. For the 5 children who lost their father figure that Easter Sunday, the path forward remains challenging. Extended family members have maintained their commitment to keeping the siblings together, providing stability amid profound loss. Child welfare professionals continue to work with the children, helping them process their trauma while building resilience. Their journey illustrates the long shadow that domestic violence casts over families, effects that continue long after headlines fade and public attention moves elsewhere. The Birmingham community's response to Bostic's death evolved from initial shock to sustained action. Local domestic violence organizations reported increased donations and volunteer applications in the months following the tragedy. Several churches and community centers implemented awareness programs specifically addressing male victims of domestic violence, working to dismantle the stigma that prevents men from seeking help. The Jefferson County Commission reviewed its employee assistance programs, enhancing resources for staff members experiencing domestic difficulties. This institutional response acknowledges that workplace policies can play a crucial role in preventing domestic violence fatalities. Mickese Bostic story, a dedicated father and public servant whose life ended violently on a day meant for celebration, reminds us that domestic violence destroys potential, traumatizes children, and damages communities. His legacy lives on not only through those who remember him personally, but through increased awareness and action that may help prevent similar tragedies. As one community leader noted at a memorial service held 1 month after Bostic's death, the best way to honor Mickese's memory is to build the kind of community where this doesn't happen again, where people in trouble have places to turn, where children are protected from trauma, and where violence is never accepted as inevitable. What do you think could have prevented this tragedy? Subscribe and hit the notification bell to see more cases that shed light on important social issues.